What's going on, guys? It's Mark Reel, host of the Father's Rights Playbook. And today we have a very special episode, the first episode from our brand new Corona, California studio. And on today's episode, we're going to cover all things parental alienation with the Real Father's Rights senior trial attorney, Brian Mayer. I hope you guys enjoy. Welcome in, guys, to another episode of the Father's Rights Playbook. And this is a very special episode because it is our first episode in our brand new studio here in Corona, California. And to celebrate the occasion, I have one of our very own. I have senior trial attorney Brian Mayer, who works out of our Corona office. And today we're going to talk about parental alienation. So Brian, welcome into the show. I'll turn it over to you to get started here. Do you want to tell the listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm a senior trial attorney here at Real Father's Rights. I work out of the Corona office, but we serve all of Southern California. I've been practicing for about 18 years. I am a certified family law trial advocacy specialist. That certification comes from the National Board of Trial Advocacy as accredited by the State Bar of California. So I've been doing this for a little while. It's been great being here with Real Father's Rights. I've really been able to just really help out some folks that I feel like we've just really been able to make a difference. And I'm particularly passionate about parental alienation. It's something that's, it is fixable. It's something that can be addressed. It can be a fight, but it's something where oftentimes I just see people, they don't know what to do. Yeah. And being able to help them out in that way is really rewarding.
Yeah, as I always say, the number one mistake I see men make, we represent hundreds of men, is they don't do anything until it's too late. So to get this started, can you describe or tell us what is parental alienation?
Absolutely. Parental alienation, it's not a legal term of art. It's not something you'll find in the DSM, the psychology diagnostic manual. It's really something more of a lay term, but the term itself is something that there's sort of a universal sort of lay understanding of what it means. And parental alienation really is the description of any course of conduct perpetrated usually by a caregiver with the intent of disrupting the relationship between the other caregiver and their child. It can take on many forms. It can be subtle. It can be minor infringement. So mommy says that we shouldn't be playing soccer. Mom wants to take me to the movies. Do I have to go to your house? Yeah. Or it can be a lot more overt. Parent just doesn't show up for visits. You'll never see your child again. You try to call the child. They don't pick up the phone.
Daddy's scary.
Daddy is scary. Oh my gosh, that breaks my heart. Yeah. But it's any course of conduct.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing in our practice that we see, and I want to know if you agree, is that we have to identify there's a difference between you having issues with your relationship with your child and parental alienation. And I think a lot of our clients are becoming more educated, whether it's shows like this, other videos on YouTube about what parental alienation is. What is typically your strategy or advice for bringing up parental alienation? Because a lot of dads are scared in the beginning to use that term because it may turn the judge.
Well, and that's a very intuitive question, and there's some truth to that because it's not a legal term of art. Oftentimes the judges are not familiar with it, or whatever their experience has been on the bench related to when the term is tossed about. It's given them the sense that, oh, this is here's someone they're a bad parent and they're blaming the other parent. Oh, it's the other parent's fault that I don't have a relationship with my child. So you really want to use that term cautiously. Now, I will say that especially in the last 10 years, judges have been getting a lot better about their understanding that this is a real thing, that it's something that goes on. And I can say in the counties where I'm practicing down here in Southern California, I'm hearing judges use the phrase parental alienation, and it's music to my ears when a judge says something like, I think there may be parental alienation going on here. This looks like it could be parental alienation. They get it. They understand those components. So, if you don't know your judge, if you don't know how they're going to respond, you do want to use it very cautiously. And what I would recommend, generally speaking, is if you're not sure how the judge is going to respond, if you don't know for sure that this is a judge who's familiar with parental alienation, who gets the ins and outs of it, simply don't use the phrase, but rather describe what's actually happening. When you describe parental alienation, you know it's wrong, even if you don't have a label for it. You know it's wrong that mom is telling the child daddy's scared. You know it's wrong that she's not showing up for the visits. You can tell the judge what's happening and let the judge put together for themselves. They can piece together the puzzle that whatever you call it, this isn't right.
Yeah. I'll say this. I think that any attorney worth their weight is going to be able to build that up without, if they don't know the judge. And I think our firm is in front of some judges on a daily basis or multiple times a day. But you know which ones are going to say, I know there are specific judges in Riverside County who will say, Mom, if this is true, if there's parental alienation occurring, and you know they're all in on it. But if you're not 100% familiar with the judge, I think there's a way you can kind of set it up. You can call it other things. You have some professionals refuse resist dynamic, or like you said, describing the behavior the judge will tip their hand. And once the judge tips their hand, you can go all in on it.
That's exactly right.
The worst thing is when pro se, when you're by yourself, you're pro per, you're representing yourself, and you just start throwing it out there with nothing backing it up. That's your easiest way to lose credibility, even if the judge recognizes parental alienation.
Absolutely. And it's really important to keep that credibility for sure going into court, because even though these judges oftentimes are dealing with 10, 15, 20 cases per day, and they're doing this every day of the week, they oftentimes will remember a case. They'll remember it. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? So once you create that impression, it's like any other human relationship. It's difficult to dislodge yourself from that impression. And to be straightforward, I think that's really something where having an attorney can come in. If you have someone where they can help out, is just having a different face there. If number one is maybe if you've been representing yourself and you feel like the judge is not listening to you, having a different face in front of them who probably knows the judge and is probably in front of the judge every week, if not every day, they will listen better to that person. And furthermore, even if you're dealing with an attorney who's just the judge seems to have a bad relationship with them, you can hit the reset with that judge. Oh, thank goodness they have a new attorney coming in. This person now can finally listen to what they're saying.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the benefits of what we do, and we represent the men. And I remember early in my practice, I'm sitting in the courtroom, and an attorney had a case called, and immediately after, and they were representing, I forget if it was the man first or the woman first, they were representing a man, we'll say, in the first case, and then they, in the same exact chair, have their next client walk up and they make the exact opposite argument. And I've had conversations with judges outside of court. They don't forget that type of stuff. It's like you said, it's truly amazing that a judge will be from 6 months ago and they'll snap, didn't this happen 6 months ago? And they've had hundreds of hearings since then. So I completely agree. So moving on to the next pieces. So someone comes in, we've identified potential, or what are you looking for to identify potential parental alienation?
Well, the thing is that when someone is the victim of parental alienation, they may not know what to call it, but they can feel it happening. Okay. They will tell me, oh, I'm so frustrated. Mom I have custody during school days, and she came to school and changed the kids' clothes. Why did she do that? And the answer is power and to aggravate you. She bought them these fancy new smartwatches, and she's texting all the time, and I don't feel like I can take it away from them because now they've lost this thing, but she's texting them when she knows we're out doing things. When when parents come to us who are being alienated, usually it is foremost on their minds, and it just comes right out because they're saying, look, this is why I'm coming to you. I'm having these problems.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I've seen is a lot of times the strongest parental alienation cases are not from the parents who come in saying I'm being alienated. They come in with this laundry list of issues of like, I'm struggling with my relationship with my kids. Is that something you see?
Absolutely, and that's an excellent point. It's because I think really for an alienator, they're usually all in because there's just something going on in their soul that there's just a level of contempt or something. So the pieces of the watch are not wound right, and it's going to come out. And it's not going to be one little thing. It's going to be a poison that is dripping into the well of the relationship between the parent and the child.
Definitely. And so we've identified it. Most likely, a lot of times the really strong parental alienation cases are the ones where the file is 4 feet high. So we come into a parental alienation case. What are the first steps usually? What are you looking to do? What are those first couple of first downs you need to get in building that case?
Well, I hate to see 4-foot files. It happens, and frankly, it's almost never. I say this sincerely. It's never our fault. It's always something the other side does, and that's part of oftentimes the tactic. Is if you're going to make someone do what they're supposed to do, there's a process to it, and it is a long process. It is an arduous process, and oftentimes they will weaponize the court system as part of their campaign to disrupt the relationship between the child and the other parent.
I find one thing is usually they're obsessed with being the victim. The perpetrator is usually the one that is obsessed with on social media, in their life. They need these excuses. They need to be the victim.
Oh my gosh. So I can't prove this because there are no studies on it.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm completely convinced that a minimum of 3/4 of the alienators are diagnosable with some sort of personality disorder. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what a personality disorder is. It's you're not able to, you see the world through a tainted lens where you are the victim, where I'm not the one who's the problem. It's everybody else who's the problem.
Even minor. It's like they are the world's biggest victims.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that's really part and parcel because look, if you are the victim in your mind, you can justify going outside of social norms to doing these things. Well, my situation isn't like everyone else. You don't know how terrible he was to me. That's why I can A, B, C, D, and E. Okay. They need that victimization in order to justify to themselves their bad behaviors.
Yeah. And I see a lot of times it'll come from in the clients we deal with, it'll be the man's moved on, they're happy, maybe they've been financially successful, they've moved on to the next relationship, and then all of a sudden it's like I was the victim of sexual violence or physical violence, or if they don't make that, it was emotional, usually all three.
Well, in those situations, the alienator has moved on and they have a new relationship with their bitterness.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what they're married to now. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's and this is oftentimes the case. Look, if you have someone else in your life who you can love and give attention to, that means, first of all, you're not bogged down by the baggage of the relationship you left, and secondly, your heart has released any aggression and hate. And frankly, I think to an extent, you have a partner who can help kind of keep you accountable to how you're treating the other parent, what you're doing to your child, that sort of thing. When you have someone who's still caught in the past, who's trapped in their feelings toward the other parent and their ideas of, oh, I've been wronged, you don't see them moved on. You see them fixated.
Yeah, definitely. And so really moving on to the last step. So we've identified it. We take some steps. What are those first couple of first downs we need to get? What ultimately, as the attorney, are you looking for from the judge in terms of outcomes in case, and how do we remedy when some of these cases of alienation can be really, really brutal?
Well, I'll tell you, in the most severe cases, what the game plan usually ends up being is painting the other side into a corner where you can prosecute them for contempt. Because if they're not going to do what's right on their own, if they are not going to do what's right by court order, then the only thing really left is consequence. Okay, meaningful consequences for what they've done. The contempt route is not a fast route. It takes a long time to get there. The evidence that needed is not like what's needed for ordinary family law cases. Now, we're fortunate here in California because it's contempt is something called a quasi-criminal proceeding. What that basically means is that we don't have to leave it to the district attorney's office to prosecute. We can criminally prosecute these individuals ourselves. And so oftentimes it's about setting things up so that we have a clear violation of the court order, and we have proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the order was violated. So what that oftentimes means is going to the court, getting orders that are specific and verifiable, so that one of two things happens: either the parent follows through on it, and the victim parent can then work on the relationship with the child, or we have something with enough teeth where now we can go forward and basically pursue, if it's serious enough, things like fine, jail time, criminal record, those sorts of things. And it's like, okay, now, is this going to keep happening and you're going to be going back to jail every time you do it? Or are you going to finally do what's right because you have no other choice?
Yeah, that's a big one. And I think in general in family law for men and women is getting orders that are contemptible, that actually have some teeth, because usually what you see is that alienator, that person that's driving that, is someone who's going to try to slide their way out. They're going to blame, they're going to be the victim. And if you don't have an order that's concrete and clear and you can say there was a violation, then you really have nothing to hold them accountable to.
Yeah, and folks listening to this who have not gotten that far in their process, they don't understand how right you are about that. Getting those orders, and oftentimes you don't know exactly how the order is going to need to be tailored until the other parent starts violating them. And then you have to go back and be like, okay, now we know their game, so we can block it, we can cut it off.
You get the minute order, which is the courtroom assistant types it up. It's usually got no teeth. It tells the parents what to do, but there's ways to wiggle out of it. And all of a sudden, 3, 6, 9 months later, you find yourself back in court the attorney asking if they can draft up the findings in order after hearing so they can actually put something in place. A lot of times when you see that coming down the chute, some judges will not allow you to do it, but I always liked, hey, let's do the findings in order so we can get the exact language we want.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. So we're coming to an end here. Brian, thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with all of our listeners and viewers. And to all of you guys, thank you again for either watching or listening to this episode of the Father's Rights Playbook. We'll see you back next week for another episode. What's going on, guys? It is Mark Reel Jr., the Father's Rights Attorney. And on August 7th, I am releasing my first book, The Father's Rights Playbook. My introduction to family law was my own family law case and going through the family court system. And in doing that, my eyes were open to the injustices that occur and the trials and tribulations that fathers are put through. So it was a personal experience, and then my eyes were open to this broad systemic issue, which has inspired me to build this firm and now write this book.